You know, as we close this past year and we welcome the new, what better time is there for auditing our experiences of the past year so that we can get a better handle for the year to come? Now, each one of us does this in a very different and personal way, yet there is something that we can learn from Moshe the innkeeper, okay, who was employed who employed a very unique and special way of auditing. Now, the Baal Shem Tov, his students came to him and they said, how is it that we can best prepare for the high holidays? And the Baal Shem Tov said, go and observe Moshe the innkeeper. And so they did. All of the students, they went and they took a room in the inn. And they waited until late at night. And around midnight, they could hear a little bit of rustling down in the front room. And they all came to the railing and they looked down. And they saw that Moshe the innkeeper was sitting there. And he was rustling some papers. And he turned around and he reached up and he took down 2 volumes. And he opened the first volume. Now, this first volume was a record of his misdeeds that he kept track of. The date, the time, the detail, whenever he made a transgression. Now, his transgressions were little. You know, sometimes he'd forget to put a shekel in the charity box, and sometimes he would wake up late and he'd miss morning davening. They were not big misdeeds, but within 4 or 5 pages, he was sitting and sobbing, and it went on for about an hour. He just sobbed and sobbed until he was able to get himself together, just looking at these misdeeds that he had done throughout the year. Well, then he reached and he got the second book, and he opened up the second book and he began looking at it, and these were the ones that the HaKodesh Baruch Hu had made errors. The innkeeper, Moshe, he said, you know, there were so many things that I wanted to happen, and they didn't happen. I didn't want for my horse to come lame. I didn't want for the wheel to fall off my truck, my wagon. I didn't want for my daughter to become ill. I didn't want for all of these things to happen. He began to cry again. But then a little glint came in his eye, and he said, you see, my Father in heaven, though I've sinned against you, last year maybe you sinned against me too. And you know, sometimes I succumb to the evil inclination, but last year I prayed and I begged you for a year of health and prosperity, and I trusted in you that it would indeed come to pass. Dear Father, dear parents, today is the eve of Rosh Hashanah, and everyone forgives and is forgiven. Let us put the past behind us. I'll tell you what, you forgive me, I forgive you. And we'll call it even. You know, I think this is true for many of us whose talus falls off in the middle when you're trying to give a little talk. I was reading recently, I came across just something that caught my eye in this regard. It was from a singer-songwriter by the name of Andy Squires. He's also what he calls a poet-priest. And he said, you know, my life with God has been a complicated one, and I can't really say that these complications have all been my fault. I think a fair assessment would be that each of us allowed the other to experience a little, at least some degree of disappointment in our friendship. I've misunderstood him. I'm pretty sure he's always understood me, but he hasn't necessarily been very vocal about it. It's not easy being friends with people and making friendships right. With God, it's no different. And so as we go forward into this new year, may it be so that we have all of those things that we need and many of the things that we want. But let's keep in mind that each of us makes some mistakes now and then. And since we are made in the image of God, why shouldn't we think that God too makes some mistakes? And so, let us forgive one another. And we'd be done with it. We'll call it even. Hashanah Tovah.